Ladies and gentlemen, do not let the scoreline fool you. Do not let the clean, straight sets shape of it reduce this match into something ordinary. Alexandra Eala did not merely defeat Elina Svitolina in Berlin. She did not simply win 6-3, 6-4, or, if you read it from Svitolina's side of the scoreboard, 3-6, 4-6. She walked onto the grass of the Steffi Graf Stadion inside a WTA 500 tournament built as one of the final proving grounds before Wimbledon, and she turned a quarterfinal into a declaration. This was not an upset dressed in luck. This was not a young player surviving while a veteran collapsed. This was a controlled strike against one of the sport's great competitors, a former elite standard bearer, a top 10 opponent, a player whose entire identity is built on resistance. And Eala beat resistance with resistance. She beat experience with clarity. She beat pressure with execution. Officially, Eala defeated number 6 seed and world number 8. Elina Svitolina 6-3, 6-4 in 1 hour and 23 minutes to reach the Berlin semifinals, her 6th career top 10 win and her 2nd grass court semifinal. The setting mattered. Berlin was not just another stop on the calendar. The Vanda Pharmaceuticals Berlin Tennis Open is a WTA 500 grass court event staged at the historic Steffi Graf Stadion, a tournament designed to carry the pressure, speed, and prestige of the Wimbledon lead-up into Germany's capital. The tournament itself describes Berlin as a place where the world's best compete for a WTA 500 title on grass, with Wimbledon atmosphere built into the week, and the WTA lists the 2026 event from June 15th to June 21st on grass in Berlin. That is why this win mattered beyond one draw, beyond one Friday, beyond one quarterfinal. Eala entered this week as a wild card with momentum, having already beaten Donna Vekic and then world number 2 Elena Rybakina 7-5, 6-4 before meeting Svitolina. In tennis terms, that is not a run. That is a stress test. That is a player being asked 3 different questions by 3 different levels of opponent and answering all of them in the same language. Early contact, fearless returning, and a refusal to blink when the match begins to tighten. Svitolina came into this match not as a fading name, but as a danger. She is one of those players who does not lose easily because she makes you win the match more than once. She turns rallies into negotiations. She extends pressure until impatience appears. She survives long enough to make the younger player feel the weight of the finish line. And that was the real trap for Eala. Not just Svitolina's ranking, not just her seed, not just her defensive instincts, but the emotional architecture of playing someone who has built a career on coming back. Svitolina had just taken care of Eva Leis 6-3, 6-2 to reach this quarterfinal, and the pre-match logic was simple. If Eala's win over Rybakina was the shock, Svitolina was supposed to be the examination. But this is where the story changed, because Eala did not play like someone protecting a miracle. She played like someone expanding a pattern. She did not arrive hoping for another upset. She arrived prepared to make the previous upset look like evidence, and the numbers tell the story if you know how to listen to them. Eala won only 50.9% of her first serves in, while Svitolina actually landed 59.7% on. So the raw first serve percentage, the kind of number casual viewers often worship, belonged to the loser. But that is exactly why this match becomes fascinating. Eala's serve was not dominant by volume. It was dominant by consequence. When she made the first serve, she won 79.3% of those points, 23 of 29. That means the serve was not simply starting the rally, it was structuring the point. It was buying the first attacking ball. It was opening the court. It was giving her forehand and backhand the fraction of time needed to take control. Meanwhile, her second serve was the one crack in the armor. Only 32.1% of second serve points won, 9 of 28. That is the weakness. That is the warning label. Against Svitolina, she survived it because her return game was so devastating. Against the next opponent, against bigger hitters, against someone who steps inside the baseline and attacks the second delivery without hesitation, that number must rise. But if the second serve was the vulnerability, the return game was the weapon that made everything else possible. Eala won 50.7% of her return points overall, 34 of 67 against a top 10 opponent on grass. On grass, where the server is supposed to breathe easier, Eala made Svitolina play every service game as if it were a negotiation under pressure. She won 32.5% of first serve return points, which is already a meaningful dent against a veteran, but the real violence came on the second serve. Eala won 77.8% of points when Svitolina missed the first delivery, taking 21 of 27. That is not returning. That is punishment. That is a young player sending a message that if you give her a second look, the rally may already be lost. And from that pressure came the defining statistic of the match. 5 breaks from 10 chances, 5 breaks in 2 sets. 5 separate moments where Svitolina was asked to hold the line and Eala broke through it anyway. Think about what 5 out of 10 break points means in a match like this. It means Eala was not waiting for collapse. She was creating a repeated crisis. It means she was not stealing one loose game and protecting it. She was knocking at the door again and again until the scoreboard had no choice but to open. Svitolina converted 3 of 6 break points herself, so this was not a match without danger for Eala. It was not clean in the sterile sense. It was clean in the competitive sense. Every time chaos appeared, Eala found the next answer. She saved 3 of 6 break points. She lost serve enough to remind everyone that the contest was real, but she broke more often, hit cleaner under pressure, and won the match that matters most. 66 total points to Svitolina's 58, 53.2% of all points played. In tennis, dominance does not always look like winning 80% of the points. Sometimes dominance is winning 53% of the right points at the right time with the right shot in the right silence. The first set was the blueprint. Eala broke early for 2-0, and that first break was more than a scoreboard advantage. It was an opening argument. It told Svitolina that the cross-court exchanges would not be safe, that the second serve would be attacked, that the short ball would not be forgiven. Eala stretched the lead to 4-1, and in that stretch, she looked less like a wild card and more like the player imposing terms. But then came the Svitolina response, because there is always a Svitolina response. The Ukrainian pulled it back to 4-3, and suddenly the match entered its first psychological chamber. This is where young players often rush. This is where they feel the earlier lead slipping away and begin playing the scoreboard instead of the ball. Eala did the opposite. She broke immediately. No panic, no drift, no emotional concession. And then she closed the set with a forehand winner, turning a possible collapse into a 6-3 statement. The second set repeated the story, but with even more tension. Eala broke first again, moving ahead 2-0, and again Svitolina clawed her way back to 2-2. That could have been the shift. That could have been the moment when the veteran said, "Now the match begins on my terms." But Eala answered with another break for 3-2, and later broke again to give herself a chance to serve for the match at 5-2. That detail matters, because it proves the match was not won by one emotional surge. It was won by sustained disruption. Yet the finish line became complicated. Eala failed to serve it out on the first attempt. Svitolina, refusing to disappear, narrowed the score to 5-4 and pushed Eala to 0-30. That is the knife-edge moment. That is when the crowd senses a third set. That is when a player can begin to think, "I had this." That is when the arm can tighten and the mind can become loud. And then Eala won 4 straight points. 4 straight points. She did not crawl over the finish. She reclaimed it. She ended the match with a backhand winner, the kind of closing shot that does not whisper relief. It announces arrival. Tactically, this was a masterclass in controlled aggression. Eala did not try to overpower Svitolina in the way Rybakina or Sabalenka might overpower someone. She did not need to win the match by hitting through the court every 3 balls. Instead, she changed height, redirected pace, and turned defense into offense with the discipline of a player who understood the geometry of grass. Her serve patterns were not about raw ace production. See, she hit 3 aces to Svitolina's 4, but about earning the first strike. When the first serve landed, she often used it to pull Svitolina wide, especially from the left-handed angle, opening the court for the next ball. On return, she stepped in whenever Svitolina's second serve sat up, taking time away and forcing the veteran into low-percentage neutralizing shots. Her shot selection was not reckless. It was sharp. The forehand was used as a closing weapon, but the backhand did much of the structural damage, holding the cross-court lane until she could change direction and expose space. Movement was the hidden engine. On grass, balance is everything. A player can look fast and still be late if the first step is wrong. Eala's movement was not just athletic, it was anticipatory. She read patterns early enough to avoid defending from emergency positions, and because of that, Svitolina rarely got to build the long, suffocating rallies that usually feed her comeback instincts. When Svitolina tried to redirect, Eala recovered quickly. When Svitolina tried to stretch her wide, Eala slid into defense without surrendering court position for too long. When the ball came short, Eala moved forward decisively rather than hesitating at the baseline. This is the grass court education happening in real time. Not just hitting lower, not just serving bigger, but understanding that every half step matters, that every return position is a statement, that every recovery step either protects the next shot or invites pressure. Mentally, this was the part that should worry the rest of the draw, because Eala did not win as if she were emotionally floating from the Rybakina result. She won as if she had reset completely. That is rare. Big wins can drain young players. They can create a hangover. They can make the next match feel like an encore instead of a new battle. But Eala treated Svitolina like a separate mountain. She absorbed the first set comeback from 4-1 to 4-3. She absorbed the second set comeback from 5-2 to 5-4. She absorbed 0-30 when serving for survival, not just victory. And each time, the answer was the same. Step forward, trust the pattern, finish with conviction. This was not emotional perfection. It was an emotional recovery. That is more important. Anyone can look calm when everything is going smoothly. Champions reveal themselves when the match starts trying to rewrite them. The critical insight is this: Eala's ceiling is rising, but the second serve remains the lever that will decide how high and how soon. Winning only 32.1% of second serve points is not sustainable deep into tournaments against elite returners, especially on faster surfaces where opponents can step in and take control immediately. That weakness did not disappear because she won. It was masked by extraordinary returning, by efficient first serve points, and by superior clutch execution. Against Linda Noskova in the semifinal, a player who, according to the WTA, defeated Paula Badosa 6-1, 6-3 in just 68 minutes and produced a serving performance built around 8 aces and more than 73% first serve points won. The cost of a vulnerable second serve could be higher. So the next challenge is clear: keep the return violence, keep the baseline clarity, but raise the floor behind the second delivery, because in the later rounds, the margins shrink and free attacks become fatal. The bigger picture is impossible to ignore. Eala entered the week ranked number 35 on the official WTA week-by-week listing for June 15, 2026, with a career-best ranking of number 29 already achieved earlier in the season. A semifinal at a WTA 500 does more than add points. It changes how locker rooms prepare for you. It changes how draws feel when your name appears. It changes the scouting report from promising young left-hander to proven top 10 problem, and the live ranking implication is obvious. With a semifinal run in Berlin, she moves back toward the top 30 conversation and strengthens her Wimbledon positioning at exactly the right moment. But rankings are only the visible currency. The invisible currency is fear. Players now know that if Eala gets a rhythm on return, their service games can unravel. They know that if they feed her second serve looks, she can convert a grass court match into a return clinic. They know that if they give her a lead, she is becoming harder to chase down. This is why the match feels historic, not because one Filipino player won one quarterfinal, not because a wild card had one inspired week, but because the pattern is beginning to repeat against names that matter. Vikic, Rybakina, Svitolina, different styles, different reputations, same result. Eala is no longer just entering these matches with talent. She is entering with a game plan, a competitive identity, and the ability to make elite players uncomfortable in places where they are supposed to feel safe. The scoreboard says 6-3, 6-4. The deeper story says she broke one of the tour's strongest competitors 5 times, won more than half of the total points, survived the late charge, and closed with authority. The scoreboard says straight sets. The deeper story says pressure came, pressure spoke, and Eala answered louder. So when history looks back at this Berlin afternoon, it should not remember it as routine. It should remember the grass under the feet, the old soul of the Steffi Graf Stadion, the veteran across the net, the young left-hander refusing to retreat, and the final 4 points when the match tried one last time to escape her. It should remember that this was the day Eala did not just chase the future. She dragged it closer. This was not just a win. This was evidence. This was not just momentum. This was construction. This was not the end. This is the beginning.